I'm going to speak with Jody Jensen Shaffer, who wrote this wonderful nonfiction book called Creep, Leap, Crunch, a Food Chain Story. So thank you, Jody, for spending time with me today.
Thank you for having me.
My first question is this. It says on the back flap of the book about the author that you have written over 70 fiction and nonfiction books for children. I mean, that is so impressive. I'd like to know, how did your passion for writing, and especially writing for children, when did it begin?
Well, when I was a kid, I loved to write books, as a lot of kids do. And my parents, they praised me for my creativity. So that was probably where it started because you kind of don't know if you're good at anything until somebody sort of tells you that you're good at it. So I've always loved to be creative. But in terms of writing books for children as an adult, that really didn't come to me until my own kids got into elementary school. And I decided, hey, listen, if I'm going to take this interest of mine and my degrees in English, if I'm going to, do something with those while they're gone during the day, then I'm just, this is the perfect time. So I just decided I would sit down and I would learn how to write picture books. And that's how that happened.
It's really interesting over my 30-year career as a librarian, hearing, countless numbers of authors over the years. And it's really interesting to hear how many authors and illustrators will say that they'll have this inkling or this passion as a child, and then they'll go a different venture and then they come back to it, but then they'll dedicate time to get good at it.
Well, I know that when I sat down, when I decided I was going to try to do this thing, I sat down at the computer and I was kind of like, okay, now what happens? Because I really didn't know. I mean, I had been immersed in picture books and all other kinds of books because of reading with my children, but I really didn't know how to write a picture book. So I spent like the next probably a good solid 4 years doing a lot of research and a lot of, trial and error about and just, how do you write a picture book? And it wasn't that I wasn't writing a picture book at the time or writing picture books, but I was learning really how to do it during that time as well. So that was kind of my education.
That's
Yeah.
an education for sure.
Yeah.
One thing I like about the way the publisher describes the story, and I want to read their words because they really worded it beautifully. Follow along as a day in the life of the food chain begins. From the sun that shines upon the grass and the trees to the animals that feed each other, each element in nature has its place. But what happens when the food escapes? This cumulative story will delight with a surprise ending that all science lovers will enjoy. I mean, that's just a great promo. Can you talk about why this particular topic you chose to write about and using that approach to do the cumulative tale?
Yeah, yeah. I remember sitting at my desk and thinking I wanted to write about the food chain, but I knew what books were already out there for kids about the food chain, and I wanted to make mine different and interesting. And I started thinking about structures. What kind of a structure could I use to tell the tale? And for some reason, the old woman who swallowed a fly came to my head, and I thought about it and I thought about it. I remembered how that went. And I was like, that's a food chain story, sort of. I mean, of a certain kind. And so I just got to playing with the structure of that poem and playing with, kind of how that would work in in the animal kingdom. And I came up with this with the story.
What a great way to talk about the food chain in such an engaging way. I love the illustrated glossary. Did you have any pushback on getting that included in the book?
No, and in fact, I absolutely love the glossary. I had included just the text of a glossary for at the back of my manuscript when I sent it in, but I did not know that they were going to illustrate it and make it so lovely. And it's actually an extension of the book, I feel like, as opposed to kind of like just back matter. It feels like an extension of the book.
You're right. It really does. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine the book not having that piece. That's going to bring me to talk about the research process now. Tell me about what was challenging and were there any facts you discovered that were just really surprising? Because I think that's the wonder of no matter how old we are, of continually learning that we're always amazed at something new we discover. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, my first challenge in getting started with this book was deciding which food chain I wanted to choose, like what was the setting, because there are different food chains no matter where you are. If you're in a rainforest, the food chain is different there than if you're in a, temperate deciduous forest like this one is set in. So first of all, I had to decide where I wanted to set the story. And I decided I'm from Missouri. Let's just set it in one of our forests. That's where I am most knowledgeable of. So then I had to decide which animals I wanted to include. So I had to research which animals live in a temperate deciduous forest. What do they eat? Who eats them? And I had to make sure that I had that process correct. And then then I just got to researching in depth each of the animals and specifically their little habitats within the larger picture. And one of the things I remember getting Christopher Silas Neal's illustrations and seeing his cricket, and his cricket was brown, and I was like, wait a minute, is that a cricket? Because I'm familiar with black crickets. So in my head, I was like, oh, this is going to be, this picture is going to show a black cricket. Well, come to find out, crickets come in both colors. So that was a fun fact. Another fun fact that I found when I was doing my research was that red milk snakes, they don't have fangs, they don't have venom, so they are actually they squeeze their prey to kill them, and then they swallow them whole. So I thought that was an amazing fact that I did not know.
I hope teachers really take advantage of this little interview because you just gave such a perfect mini lesson on starting the research process with children. It was perfect. Talking about the illustrator, Christopher Silas Neal, oh my gosh, you must have been tickled pink to get him as your illustrator.
Mm. What a blessing for Christopher to illustrate this book. I mean, he is self-taught, and his style is just so engaging and so active, and kids just love it. I mean, he brought the drama of the page turn when he illustrated this book. So I was super, super excited when I knew that he was attached to the project. I didn't have anything to do with that. The publisher chose him, paired him up with my text. And so I was super glad about that. He is an amazing talent. And I was just overwhelmed when I saw his sketches and his illustrations. I mentioned, one of the things that we talked about the cricket and how that was different than what I thought. And, just the interpretation of the text that Christopher brings to it, how he lays out the scenes and how each animal is featured in each scene. Close up. Usually there's a close up of the animal that we're talking about, and the rest of the animals are in the background, or the trees and the leaves are in the background. He's just done a marvelous job. One of my favorite spreads is early in the book, when we see the worms underneath the ground. And the text doesn't say anything about worms, but Christopher has added he has sliced, yes, he has sliced it off the earth. He has sliced the earth, and you can see in the dirt, and you can see what happens underneath, and where the roots are rest. So I just love that. Another of my favorite spreads is I love when the hawk is waiting at the mouth of the little hole where the snake goes in. I just love that. I mean, you can feel the action in each of his spreads. And then finally, when we see the great big black bear in the very last spread, and all you can see are his ears and his, kind of his the top of his head. And when I go to schools and visit with kids about that, you turn the page and we talk about the bear, and sometimes kids miss that. And then we go, does anybody notice where the bear is? And they're like, oh, the bear's right there. So it just, I'm just so thrilled. I feel really lucky.
Do you think you'll have any additional collaborations with him in the future?
I hope so. I
Yeah.
hope so.
It seems like a perfect match, your work and his work together. Last question is, your
Yeah.
website bio reveals that you are endlessly fascinated by the natural world. You love to take walks and you love being a child. And what a beautiful, beautiful thing to say about you. Are there any words of wisdom or tips for our parents and teachers who would love to see all children grow up to say those same things about themselves?
Wow. Well, I don't feel like I'm an authority on telling people how to parent, but I will say that my parents gave me a lot of opportunity to just explore and just to be outside and to not be restricted by, I mean, we didn't watch a lot of TV in my house. We were limited. And of course, we didn't have, computers and cell phones and everything else. So we spent a lot of time outdoors. And, we looked at the small things. I mean, we raised puppies, litters of puppies periodically. And, they would be outdoors and we would just spend, hours with them. We had a garden. And so all the kids participated in, harvesting and shelling peas before we could go to the swimming pool. So I just spent a lot of time outside, just in my backyard or with my friends or family, just playing and without being scheduled up. And I still played softball and I still played basketball. So it's not that you have to separate your child from the activities that everybody else is doing. But boy, just the opportunity to have free time
Right.
really,
Yeah.
really was helpful.
I agree completely. And it's so
Yeah.
simple, really. And sometimes we just forget about the most basic of things to just allow children to do, just to be and explore. Well, Jody, we look forward to whatever you're producing next for us because your work is fabulous and your words of wisdom today are going to definitely encourage many children and families. So thank you for spending time with me.
Thank you for having me. It's really been fun.